Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
You know, it's fair to say that over the last 24 hours, it's been dominated by the insanity that we saw, not just from the first four, but also from the NIT as well. But let me ask you guys something. What if I told you that the insanity and some of the chaos that you see that makes March Madness so special, you could find that in an entire season of this particular sport? And if that is something that tickles your pickle, man, college football is for you. And if you enjoy college football like my co-host and I do, this is a show for you as well. Welcome, everybody, to College Football Red Zone, your exclusive home for 7+ hours of commercial-free college football. I'm joined by my co-host, Reed Napper. Buddy, how you doing tonight, my man?
Good, man. In a world that is surrounded by college basketball right now, let's talk about the more dominant sport, the better sport, college football. It never sleeps,
Yeah, it's truly the sport that never sleeps. And let me tell you why the sport never sleeps. You know, we got a schedule review for the Sun Belt, and we're going to dive into that Louisiana Tech situation. We had some developments since the last time that we got live, and then previewing our final G5 conference. And it's a little bit of a bittersweet moment as G6 Jake previewing the MAC, giving our honest power ranking, not a schedule prediction, not a record prediction by any means, but just to give you guys an idea. We're getting ready to get into spring ball. What are we looking at in terms of how these teams snack up in the MAC, including, not limited to, the new kids on the block? So very excited for that. Reed, I know you're excited for it. You ready to dive in, my man?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Yes, sir. So we got a jam-packed show here tonight, even in the midst of an extremely busy and extremely turbulent college basketball season as well. Even in that sea of basketball, we still got football content for you guys. And if you enjoy that content, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new. And also, if you're watching over on Twitch or if you're watching on Twitter, first of all, thank you guys so much for doing that. Hit that follow button. It makes it a lot easier to follow not only my content, but Reed's content as well. Reed's content constantly makes an appearance here on College Football Red Zone. And I have to say, this has been one of the more fascinating conference realignments, Reed, that I've seen in quite some time in this Louisiana Tech situation.
I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a college football team have, two conference schedules at one time. They could just run the gauntlet. Let's set the win total at 10.5 and see if they're winning 11 games from the 20 that they have on their schedule. It's absolutely insane. I'd never seen a team have that many games on a proposed conference schedule. But I mean, just the fact that we're still talking about lawsuits and, disputing if it's even, ethically right for Louisiana Tech to leave for the Sun Belt. Like it makes no sense. College football is in a state of flux, I would say right now, with a lot of things not making sense at the moment. So I don't know what your thoughts on it are, but it's pretty wild. I've never seen it before, obviously.
And I remember talking about this when we were talking about the Conference USA, and we were making our assumptions that we don't think that Louisiana Tech is going to be a part of his conference when we get into the actual football season. But it's really interesting how we're seeing the schedules rolled out. Because I remember last week we were talking about, hey, the Sun Belt, we're going to release our schedule. Word on the street is Friday, we're going to release our schedule, the Sun Belt Conference. And so you look at the Conference USA, right? And the Conference USA hasn't said anything. They weren't planning on, we didn't hear when they were going to release the schedule. Even footballschedules.com, one of the leading sources in football schedules, especially for college athletics, he hasn't heard anything. And, he's got far more sources and far more resources than we do. He hasn't heard anything. And then lo and behold, the night before the Sun Belt releases their schedule, the Conference USA releases their schedule at 11:30 at night. I mean, you literally can't make this up, Reed.
I can't remember. Did they even release like a composite graphic? Because that's what I go off of for most of these conference schedule announcements, is just the composite with every team and who they play. I don't even think they announced that. I think they literally just put up like an article or something on their website with every single team and who they play, like in a long list. I'm just like, okay, so I have to scroll forever and read a single team. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that was originally what they sent out. They did later send out an actual composite schedule.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really interesting to see the reaction as well as the timing of which the schedule was released. Very little fanfare. I mean, it was released at 11:30 o'clock in the evening. So most of the fans of Conference USA teams, your Delawares of the world, your Liberties of the world, your FIUs, you name it, they were probably either sleeping or partying. Depending on what type of whether you're a morning guy or a night guy. I'll leave that for the people in the chat. But it's really interesting. No warning. They released at 11:30 at night, to beat out the Sun Belt. And you talked about the gauntlet as well. I got it. I had the Louisiana Tech football schedule pulled up here. And look how much I had to zoom out to get this schedule to fit on one singular screen. I mean, look at this. I've never seen anything like this.
I literally don't even know. Hypothetically, if they were to play this schedule, they would have I'm just looking quickly. They would have a Wednesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Saturday. Like they would play basically 3 games in 4 days.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's insane.
Yeah, which the crazy thing about it is hypothetically, and I'm not saying that Louisiana Tech should do this at all. I'm not suggesting that. But hypothetically speaking, walk with me for a second here. Louisiana Tech chose to play both the Conference USA and the Sun Belt schedule. It is actually pretty doable. There's only 2 incidences where they're playing 2 games in the same day, so it'll be a little bit of a Bishop Sycamore situation here. But it is in fact doable, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and zoom in, just to make it a little bit easier on the eye. So
thank you.
One of the days is you're playing Jacksonville State and Troy on the road on November 7th. That's a particular type of game where you're looking at that day. It's in the same state. It's only a few hour drive. You play one game at like 10 o'clock in the morning. You play another game at 7:30 at night. Like that's doable. And then there was one more that I saw at Western Kentucky, at Georgia Southern. Might have to get a private jet, get a charter plane. Hope the weather is good as well. But again, it's doable. I'm saying it could happen.
I mean, I don't know. Just by attrition, I don't think they have enough stamina, enough in the tank to even, compete at a competitive level. I don't even think they have enough in the tank, like on the roster. But
yeah, I just wanted to show this on screen because man, it's really fascinating. to see how this is going to go. And I know that we've had some updates in terms of because of the fact that there is some like litigation happening, there's not going to be another hearing until mid-April. So we don't know what we're going to see in terms of whether the Conference USA schedules are going to be accurate or whether it's the Sun Belt schedule. There's actually going to be accurate. We did see Louisiana Tech. They did end up going ahead and they did acknowledge the Sun Belt schedule, not the Conference USA one. So the expectation, and I'm going to say this with 95% certainty, we're going to see Louisiana Tech in the Sun Belt next year. They're not going to be a member of this conference moving forward. But I think it's going to really come down to what that buyout number is going to be, as well as there's any other stipulation that's going to happen.
Yeah, I see them going to the Sun Belt. I don't think they're going to be a part of the. I don't think they're going to be, sticking around much longer. Because why even fight this? Like, I get that Louisiana Tech has been a member there for a while, but why even fight it? To be honest, like, I don't know. I just don't see the big deal in it. But what do I know? I'm not a commissioner of a conference, so.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of making sure. Like, to be fair, they're trying to get their buyout money so that money can be used to maybe like help out the other members of the conference. And there's been a fair number of members in the Conference USA that recently made the transition up to the FBS level. So I'm sure some of that is in play. But as for the teams that are actually going to be included in the Sun Belt, we do have a schedule for the Sun Belt, and because we're making the assumption that Louisiana Tech is going to be a part of this conference, I think like Louisiana Tech, they definitely have a reason to be very excited looking for moving forward. Having some in-state opponents like Louisiana and Louisiana Monroe, for example, among some other teams. Travel should be better for La Tech as well compared to what they experience in the Conference USA. So from La Tech standpoint, I perfectly understand why they want to be part of the Sun Belt moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just from the logistics point of view, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of teams regionality that they're close to. Travel, like you said, it's going to be easier for them to get back and forth for away games and stuff like that. So I think just holistically, it makes more sense for them to be in the Sun Belt. So again, I don't even know why the Conference USA is fighting against it. But I mean, again, I'm not a commissioner, so it's got to be money involved that I'm not even thinking about. But
yeah, so I would say if we were doing multiple winners, I would certainly like venture to say like La Tech, if they're actually successful in getting to the Sun Belt after get done with all these lawsuits in hand, I would consider them a winner. But I actually wouldn't consider them the biggest winner, although one of their in-state opponents that I would venture on to say I think is going to be the biggest winner in all of this is I do think Louisiana, I think is the biggest winner when it comes to the Sun Belt schedule. One of the reasons, well, a couple of different reasons. I really like how Louisiana is going to be equipped to be able to figure out who they are in this first month of the season as they progress into conference play. The bye is a little bit late, so I don't love that. They start the year off playing 8 games in a row, but the bye does fall in the middle of their conference season, so they'll play 4 games of conference play, take the bye, and then 4 games to close out the year in the month of November. But September looks pretty good in terms of you can look at a team that's easily 3-1. The USC game, that's going to be a tough one. They're going to really find out what they're made of in that USC ball game. But then beyond that, you got Lamar. That's an FCS team. UAB, who's going to be breaking in a brand new head coach, and Alex Morrison, very inexperienced as head coach, took over as the interim last year. You get them at home, mind you, at Lords and Ladies Stadium out there in Louisiana Monroe. And then you close out your non-conference play by taking on the Charlotte 49ers, who, we talked about Charlotte earlier this year. We had them in the very bottom of the American. So I look at this Louisiana football team. I think they have a good segue to build some confidence, as well as a chance to give them an opportunity to build their identity in the month of September as they prep for conference play, which for a lot of these like G6 programs, the conference play is the most important part of your season.
Yeah, ditto to everything you said. I also have Louisiana as my biggest winner. I think Exactly for all the points that you talked about. They open up with Lamar at home, an FCS team that they should handle them. I'm not going to say comfortably because I don't know Lamar, but it should be a win. USC, I think, is a good litmus test just to see how competitive you can be. Against a way more, powerhouse name in USC. I think that's a good litmus test for you. And then exactly for what you said, UAB and Charlotte to wrap up your out of conference schedule. I think Louisiana can handle both of them. UAB, as exactly as you said, Alex Mortensen coming over, to be the full-time head coach now after being an interim. So we don't really know what UAB is going to be. Charlotte was at the bottom of the American last year, and we both view them at the bottom of the American again. So I think their conference schedule is also manageable. I actually pulled up when we did our rankings of the Sun Belt, and they only play 3 teams that I had above them in South Alabama, Coastal Carolina, and Troy, and they get them all at home. So I think that also plays to their benefit. And the two rivalries that they do have, Louisiana Tech and Monroe, are both on the road, but then again, in-state rivalry, so you don't have to go too far for those. So I think their schedule is manageable in conference, and again, for the 3 teams I said they get at home that I view higher than them in the rankings, in our power rankings, I think those are manageable games. I'm going to be particularly looking out for the Troy one because we both view Troy as a top 3 team in the conference. So that third game on October 17th is definitely going to be the one I'm keeping an eye out for within conference play for sure. But I think Louisiana, again, it's a very manageable schedule back to front.
Yeah, and you mentioned like that conference schedule and the fact that it seems like their conference schedule aligns very nicely, even the road games, which is always something that you want to be cognizant of because it's hard to win on the road in college football. You could easily make the argument that maybe Louisiana Tech is going to be your toughest road game of the year. That's a team that was, like an above average team in the Conference USA. They're moving up to a higher level of competition. It seems consensusly we had La Tech at around the middle when we were doing a Sun Belt rankings, if I remember that correctly. But then the other games that they had, you got Louisiana Monroe. That's traditionally been a bottom dweller in this conference. Georgia State, who they went 1-11 last year. Del McGee is on the hot seat there. They finished out the season with them, so who knows how motivated Georgia State's going to be if they don't show significant progress in year number 3 under Del McGee. Then Southern Miss, who has a brand new head coach in Blake Anderson. We don't know what they're going to look like, if they're going to, maintain the progress made under Charles Huff's lone season with the Golden Eagles, or are we going to see them fall back to earth closer to what we saw in the Will Hall era, right? So that's your road game. So based on what you said, I mean, we definitely think that Louisiana, I think, is going to be slated really nicely. And I won't be surprised if we do end up seeing Louisiana in the Sun Belt Championship game because of how the schedule lines up.
Yeah, I'm not going to be as bullish as you are, but I definitely see them being competitive for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely see them being competitive.
Yeah, not saying that we're going to see them there. I'm just saying that if they did get there, I would be surprised but not shocked. If that makes sense. But the way that the schedule is created, with all these teams in this conference, someone had to draw via like the short end of the stick. So, we talked about how Louisiana is set up extremely nicely. What's a team for you where you look at it, they definitely got the short end of the stick?
Yeah, I'm going to go. This might surprise you. I'm going with South Alabama. I'm going with South Alabama as my loser. As we talked about with Louisiana, I think their out of conference schedule doesn't line up as well. It doesn't favor them. They start with an FCS opponent in week 1, and then they get Tulane on the road in week 2. I think Tulane we don't know what they're really going to be with overturned head coach as well. I think Tulane on the road, it's going to be a tough ask. They get Ohio at home, which I think is kind of surprising. They get the Bobcats at home in week 3, which, I mean, Ohio going down to South Alabama, that's an intriguing, just logistics wise. And then they go on the road to Lexington to face the Kentucky Wildcats. So realistically, if they get out of non-conference play 2-2, I think they have a shot to have a solid schedule. But I think they mix around a lot. They have a lot of teams that like I view in our power rankings like in like a similar range. They get Troy at home, which I think benefits them. They go on the road to Marshall, which I think could be an interesting game on October 20th. Arkansas State, we don't know how Arkansas State is going to be. They lost a lot of production, namely Jalen Rayner out of the portal. And then Southern Miss on the road could also be a challenge. But their home games are viewed very similarly to me. La Tech, I have, at the bottom, near the bottom of the conference, but they could easily be more competitive. App State, I have around the middle. Troy, as I said, is going to be competitive. And then Louisiana Monroe, you should handle them. But I think that back-to-back road stretch right in the middle there with Arkansas State and Marshall, I think is going to be a challenge, because I think going back-to-back on the road within any conference at all, I think is a challenge. So I think South Alabama could. It depends on their non-conference. If they get out of non-conference 2-2, I think they'll be fine. But 1-3, it could be hard to rebound after that.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little bit surprised, because I actually did have South Alabama. Well, not a winner. They were actually in bottom half of my like strength of schedule rankings, like in the spring. But I definitely see where you're coming from, though. Particularly with Tulane. It's going to be interesting to see what we see from Tulane. They've been a really good G5 program the last few years. Kentucky there's a lot of energy around that Kentucky program too, with Will Stein taking over, and you could make the argument they're one of the more improved teams in the SEC. And then Ohio. What do you expect out of Ohio this year? I truly don't know, but it's a program they got some grit, find a way to win the bowl game without Parker Navarro and some of the distractions that they had during the bowl season. That led to them having their now third coach in the last 3 years. Going into this fall, I ended up going in a little bit of a different direction, though. I ended up going with Southern Miss as my loser in all of this. So for me, Southern Miss comes in as my biggest loser, not just because I just so happen to think that they have the strongest schedule in this conference. I think that's the toughest strength of schedule in the Sun Belt. I also don't love how things end up breaking out in terms of the buy and fit, as well as who else they got to deal with in conference play. So first, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the non-conference. You're talking about your free FBS teams. You're all playing against teams that either go to a bowl game last year or bringing a ton of optimism. Auburn on the road. I mean, that's an incredibly difficult place to play at, even when Auburn has been down. But Alec Golesh feels like he fits what Auburn wants to be extremely well, and should have more offensive firepower than what they did last year. So that's going to be a tough draw. Then you got UConn at home, which, UConn been a really good team the last couple of years. They brought in a really good head coach in Jason Candle as well, a quality G5 coach. That could create some problems. Then you finish out with Tulane on the road, which we talked about already with Tulane in your South Alabama, why you had them as the biggest loser. Then you got a bye. And then after that bye, you have 8 games in a row to finish your year out. And we talk about the attrition of college football, playing 8 games in a row and asking 18 to 22-year-olds to come together and be consistent and be mentally locked in for 8 weeks in a row. That's going to be a challenge. You're opening up with Troy on the road, but then you also draw James Madison and Old Dominion, 2 teams that I had as the 2 highest power-rated teams last year as well. So a lot of challenges there. So Southern Miss, they're going to have – I say all that because Southern Miss, they're going to have their hands full with the schedule. And Blake Anderson in particular, has he learned from his mistakes from his time at Utah State? That's going to be the million-dollar question in all of this. If not, it could be a tough year, and we could see a return back to the Will Hall era.
Yeah, I am kind of surprised now thinking about it that I didn't go with Southern Miss because of how bad I bashed Blake Anderson when we did our coaches ranking. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for Southern Miss. There's a lot of turnover, losing Charles Huff after 1 year, bringing a lot of players with him to Memphis. So a lot of unknowns for Southern Miss. So I agree. Their schedule definitely does not stack up for a team that is going over with a lot of turnover, and exactly for what you said, they have to play 8 straight games after their bye week, which never fares well. So.
Yes, we get a special guest appearance from the dog. What's up, dog?
What's up, dog?
The dog is not named Red Zone. I like to to be fair, but he likes to come by and hang out with Mr. CEO and himself, man's best friend. But definitely curious with what you guys think down in the comment section, as well as in the live chat as well, like who you guys have in terms of biggest winners and losers. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this conference, particularly in the next few months with the La Tech situation. We think we're going to see La Tech in the Sun Belt, but we truly never know. It could get really sticky really fast.
Hey, yo.
Oh, no Diddy Ivor.
Oh my.
But
Oh,
let's go ahead and move on here now that we talked about the Sun Belt, really why we wanted to be here tonight. And I didn't set it up this way just because the MAC had two basketball teams in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1999. Him and I and a few other people that are part of the CIP Red Zone team, we got together about a month ago, putting this schedule together in terms of when we're going to break down the each conference. And it just so happened that the MAC fell in the week of March Madness, and then Miami continues its run. We saw Akron be a bid stealer, so I wanted to put that out there. It's not because we're trying to glaze Miami basketball and the fact that the MAC got two teams in their NCAA tournament for the first time since 1999. Since Reed, which the last time that happened, I was in diaper. Reed was a thought in his dad's head.
Not even a thought by then. Not even then.
But basketball aside, football, it's gonna be one of the more fascinating stories to follow. We thought about the MAC as really an institution in terms of you think of college football, you think about what we want out of college football, and that's regionality, and the MAC fits that. It's like a glove that fits you perfectly. That is what the MAC is and what the MAC represents in college football. And then what happened, Reed?
I think I do know what happened.
What happened was the Fire Nation attack, and the Fire Nation is Sacramento State, who threw all this money around, and now Sacramento State is a member of the MAC. One of the more polarizing moves that I think we've seen from the FBS in quite some time. I'm curious to see how this works. It's a bold strategy, Colin. I will say this. I'm very curious to see how it works out for Sacramento State, in the long term.
Sack to the MAC. Remember that.
Yes, they are. But I will say this. I think that this is going to be an interesting conference. I think the bottom is going to be a little bit better. I'm also curious with how Sac State's going to stack up as we get into the year. And then also, what are we going to see from a Western Michigan? Do one of the directional Michigan schools, do they end up winning it? Does Western Michigan repeat? Because what we've seen from the last 4 to 5 years, we have seen a different conference champion. So the parity is certainly there as this conference as well.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's arguably one of the most competitive conferences top to bottom, I would say, at least in the G6. I think it's one of the most competitive conferences top to bottom. I think any team can beat anyone on a given day. And shoot, we saw Kent State win 5 games last season. Don't know the last time that's happened. So definitely a competitive conference top to bottom. Anyone can beat anyone on any given weekend.
Yeah, and you talk about that, and UMass, even a team that everyone likes to drag on because they were the sole 0-12 team in the FBS last year. Even them, there was a couple of games where you looked at UMass, they were in a position to win games, and I'll kind of dive into it a little bit more in a minute. But even UMass had some opportunities to win. They weren't necessarily getting blown out of the water all the time as maybe what they were perceived to be.
Yeah, I think, I'm not to spoil what we're about to get into, but I think UMass is going to be a little more competitive this year. A little more competitive.
I certainly think there's a possibility of them being more competitive as well. But for now, what we are going to do, though, as we have done for all of the other G6 conferences, is we're going to go ahead and power rank each one of these teams, 1 through 13, because there's 13 teams now in the MAC, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, with the departure of Northern Illinois. They're no longer around, but you're replacing Northern Illinois with Sacramento State. So you still have the 13 football members for now, but we're going to rank these teams 1 through 13. And what we're also going to do as well is give our reasoning in terms of why we have certain teams at a certain spot. But it's not going to be by any means a record prediction. The max schedule, which I know is something that the Pac-Man Army mentioned about. Max schedule is not out yet. We're still waiting for that schedule. But when it does come around, we will do like record predictions when, we kind of run through this preseason exercise like in July. But for now, it's just ranking the teams 1 through 13, just who we think is better than one or the other. So that disclaimer out of the way, my man, we got some action. But let's go ahead and kick things off here. Your number 13 squad, man. Who you got at the very bottom of action, at least going into spring ball?
Now, I hate to do them dirty because I just said that they're going to be more competitive, but I am going to put UMass at 13, at least for now, going into the spring. I think UMass has potential to be really more competitive this season, solely because of the additions they made through the portal. Just scrolling down through the list, Pop Watson the is the first name that sticks out to me, coming from Virginia Tech. Did get some spot time last season for the Hokies. Was a former 3-star prospect out of high school, so I think Pop Watson the automatically stands out. I would tout him to be the starting quarterback for UMass, but they brought in a lot of notable production from Power 4 schools, namely. So I think UMass has a lot of potential to be more competitive this season. It's just how do they gel in the spring? Do they come together as a cohesive unit? As I always like to say, can they be a cohesive unit? I'm going to keep an eye out for UMass, and shout out to the Cursive U on Twitter. Great follow. So UMass is definitely going to be on my radar. I think they definitely have potential by the fall to maybe be competitive in the MAC. We'll see, but I think I'm going to keep them at 13 with the hope that they have the chance to bounce up by the time of the fall.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you mentioned the UMass. I had them at the very bottom as well. I had them as my number 13 team. But I do think that we are looking at an improved UMass unit compared to last year, right? Where it seemed that last year, even in this conference, where at the very bottom, you do see some pretty tough looking teams, in terms of being down horrendous at times. It seems that even in the bottom of the MAC, there was UMass and then there was a gap. And this year going into it, I'm looking at this UMass football team, and I can at least say that while I still have UMass at the bottom, that gap isn't there anymore. In fact, I think they're on par with who I have with my number 12 team on this list. The reason being that I have this particular team I'm going to talk about next at number 12 instead of at number 13 is that I trust their program as a whole more so than UMass's program as a whole over the last 4 to 5 years. So giving this next team a little bit more benefit of the doubt. But there are some interesting pieces that they added. And you talked about Pop Watson, which I know is a name that I know a lot of UMass fans were excited about. Cursive U in particular, which ditto, great follow. One of the first people that followed me on Twitter as well. But not just Pop Watson that I'm excited about. They also added RJ Johnson III. He's a quarterback from Florida A&M who had over 2,700 total yards of total offense, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So good year for the Rattlers. So Pop Watson's going to get a lot of the hype, but I would go so far as to say that there's going to be a quarterback battle, and it's not set on who's going to be the starter. But regardless on who wins, the receiving room should be a little better as well. Bringing in multiple FCS receivers that have good production in Randall King and Devin Matthews. You also add a couple of former blue chip players and Joseph Griffin, who transfers in from Wisconsin. He's another wide receiver. They also add the Pepe brothers, one of which is Andrew DePepe, is an edge rusher from Indiana, another former 4-star guy. They also returned Tyler Martin, who's a third-team all-conference linebacker for the Minutemen last year, was a lone bright spot in this team. So it's the type of year where Joe Hazarmiak is going to have to show some progress this year. I'm not talking about just winning the 2 FCS games that are on their schedule. They are the only team in the FBS that have multiple FCS games. They got to be an FBS team. They just have to make it happen. If not, we may be looking at a new head coach here. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised that he is still here, given that they did go 0-12 last year.
Yeah, but I mean, at least it's showing promise. At least through the portal that they are trying to improve. At least I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. At least Joe is trying to improve his team, try to keep his job. Again, UMass I think has potential to get up to maybe that 11-10-9 range by the time of the fall if all the reports out of spring ball are promising. But exactly like you said, I think one of the biggest step ups they're going to take next year is at the receiver spot, exactly for all the points that you mentioned. So no matter who the quarterback is, they're definitely going to have a good group of receivers to be slinging around to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like UMass, still at the bottom, and I might be able to venture to say UMass might end up being my 138 team. But I do think the gap is gone, and I do think that while they might start out as the worst team, there's potential there that UMass could at least be a competitive team this year. Which I think at this stage of the rebuild, I think that's all you can ask for at this time.
For sure. No doubt.
Which leads me to the number 12 team, which I actually was pretty close to putting at the very bottom, closer than what I originally thought was going to be. But after diving into, I wasn't really excited about this particular team. Is the Ball State Cardinals, led by Mike Yurkovich. I don't know what it is about these coaches that have hard to pronounce names, but last year, Ball State went 4-8, and looking at this team in particular, just looking at who they brought in versus what they lost in the transfer portal, not only wasn't there any additions that really excited me from a production standpoint, I also looked at this team. They lost a couple of pieces that were important to this Ball State team last year, whether it's Cameron Anthony, was a tight end who ends up transferring to Rutgers. And then they also lose Isaac Lucas, who was one of their best offensive linemen last year. He transfers to San Diego State. Both guys, potential breakout players. And if they were to stay at Ball State, thought they could have been all conference potential there. So wasn't a very good team last year. And I think they actually got worse over the course of the offseason. So that's why I had Ball State at number 12.
I'm a little higher on Ball State. I'm going to go with them at number 11. Exactly for all the points that you talked about, I think that Ball State is going to regress from last season. I mean, just scrolling through their roster from last season, they're losing Kyle Kelly, who started every single game for them last season at quarterback. That's going to be hard. They're losing their top running back, Qua Ashley. He is gone through the portal. So it's going to be interesting they lose their top 2 receivers. So offensively, it's going to be interesting how to replace all that production mainly. So these bottom 3 teams for me, I view on a similar plane, I would say. So I think Ball State does regress a little bit, and that linebacker room is going to take a huge hit. They lost the top 7 names on their depth chart from last season. So yeah, they're defensively is probably where I have the most questions. Their secondary and linebackers are completely diminished from where they were last season. So, but they did make a handful of transfers. I mean, we'll see if they pan out. They made a ton of transfers. I just don't know if they're going to work. So I'm going to put Ball State at 11.
Yeah, and I guess that's my thing. I did see that they add some pieces in the portal, but it's like what you mentioned. It seems that it's more potential based than actually production based. Not really bringing anybody in that has tangible production from last season. So that was why I was a little bit lower on them, but still relatively on the same brainwave in terms of them being in our bottom 3, which leads me to this next question for you, Reed. You didn't have Ball State at number 12, unlike me. So, with that being said, who did you have as your, second worst team in the MAC, if it's not Ball State?
I'm going to put the Akron Zips at 12.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to put the Akron Zips at 12. I feel like they add 26 players in from the portal. 26 newcomers, 24 from the portal. I think They do keep Reese Poffenberger at court. I mean, no, hold on. Yeah,
They added Reeve Poffenberger. I do know
added
that.
Reese Poffenberger. Yes, sorry, I mistyped my notes. They add Reese Poffenberger. I think is a solid addition. I think again, as I said with Ball State, I view these bottom three teams kind of on a similar plane. They keep a lot of their players that they had last season, but the biggest question for me is on the offensive line. They are at least from their depth chart last season. I think they're going to be replacing every single offensive lineman from last season, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the biggest question for me. If you have to replace your entire offensive line, that's a huge question mark for me. So that's mainly why I have Akron down here at 12. I just don't know how their offensive line is going to be, and their defense took a huge hit from the production that they had last season. So Akron's just a huge question mark for me. I really just don't know what I'm going to get out of them right now.
Yeah, so I actually turned out to be a lot more bullish on the Akron Zips than you. So I actually came in and I had Akron inside of my top 10, and they checked in for me as my number 8 team in the MAC. Listen, I think Joe Moorhead has done a quietly good job in terms of building this program up. Last couple of years, we saw Akron nearly make it to a bowl game. Last year, they weren't going to make a bowl game anyways because of the APR rules restrictions. That has been lifted. They do have the waiver, so they are eligible for a bowl game this year. I do worry about the defenses out of the ball, like you mentioned, that they did lose a couple pieces on that offensive line, like you mentioned. But I still like a couple of the key players that they brought back. Marcel Williams is one. He was a second team all conference player in the MAC. Then they also brought back Jordan Gant at running back as well, who was also a second team all MACtion guy too. Reese Poffenberger, he's played and experienced college football for a couple of years, brings some experience in the room. So I think Akron could be one of those teams where they actually could be flirting with a bowl game once again. And it really just goes to show the kind of job that Joe Moorhead has done, particularly the last couple of years, in spite of the fact that, hey, this is one of the more difficult places to win at historically.
Yeah, I'm not discrediting Joe Moorhead and the job he's done at Akron. He's definitely turned that program around and molded it to what he's wanted it to be. I think I just need the spring to get my head around Akron, understand what we're really dealing with here. Mainly for, again, like that offensive line. Offensive line is one of the major keys that I look for in a team when I'm first like looking at the depth chart. So if I don't like your offensive line, you're probably not going to be viewed highly in my point of view. So yeah, I just need the spring to wrap my head around Akron. But Joe Moorhead, I think, is definitely leading this program in the right direction for sure in the few years to come.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it's in Joe Moorhead we trust. I think this could be the moment where we do see them kind of break that glass ceiling that we've seen on Akron for the last few years. We see Akron in a bowl game, and I think that would be a really big accomplishment. And Akron could be set up if pieces go the right way. I think we'll see them in a bowl game. So I may be higher than consensus, like for the Akron Zips. It's not just because I'm an Ohio guy through and through, but I think there's some pieces. I think Akron is being undervalued here a little bit, but I don't feel the same way about this next team that I have on my list here, and it comes in number 11. I got Bowling Green as my number 11 team. Actually, Eddie George entering his second year. And at first, it was a solid first half of the year for Bowling Green. Looks like they were in the thick of things in the MAC championship hunt. Decent showing in terms of non-conference play, but then second half of the season, things fell apart. So really do not love the finish at all for Bowling Green. And then you parlay that by you're losing quite a bit of production in the portal. You're losing Cameron Padaway to Iowa State. You're losing Jacob Harris, who was a really nice tight end for them. He's off to Wisconsin. Defensively, you lose like a Gideon Lepron, who had almost 120 tackles for you last year. He's off to Colorado. MJ Cannon went to Cincinnati. I can go on and on. They lost quite a bit of people. And, on the back end, they only added a couple of players of production, and Kamari and Baldwin and Tamondre Braxton. So more talent leaving the building than entering the building. And then, not that it affects the ranking, but you got to understand where I'm coming from here. Pudge the Cat no longer with this program. You know, you lose an icon like Pudge the Cat. You know, you're gonna lose some brownie points with me. So not just Pudge the Cat, but the fact that they actually do lost quite a bit, and Eddie George still has to prove himself as a coach. That's why I had Bowling Green at number 11.
I guess Bowling Green is viewed to me how you view Akron. I have Bowling Green as my number 8 team not solely because, but one of the big reasons is the incoming quarterback they get from Oregon, Austin Novosad, the former 4-star prospect out of high school. I mean, he was in contention for the backup spot last season for Oregon behind Dante Moore, and I think Oregon circles raved about him every time that I saw his name come up from Oregon people on Twitter. So Austin Novosad is a huge name coming in from the portal from Oregon. I think the biggest question mark for me surrounding this Bowling Green team right now is the wide receiver room. They lose their top 3 receivers, namely Finn Hogan. As you mentioned, Pudge the Cat is not there any longer. Neither is Finn Hogan. RJ Garcia II, Alan Middleton are all out the door. So the receiver room is the biggest question for me, but they do bring in some proven production. Isaiah Dawson from Richmond had over 500 or close to 600 yards last season. A slot receiver from Richmond of the FCS, and Nicholas Sowell, who comes in from, I think that's South Carolina State. Yeah. So some proven production from the FCS level. Will it translate to the MAC? We shall see. But I think they're going to take a step up at quarterback. I think Austin Novosad is going to light the MAC, maybe not light it on fire, at least in this transition year for him. But I'm very high on Austin Novosad, and I think Bowling Green are at least going to be middle of the pack team under his tutelage at the quarterback position. So Bowling Green, I'm going to put at 8.
Yeah, and if Austin Novosad ends up being who he says he is, like particularly the recruiting rankings, then yeah, like my Bowling Green at 11, I'm gonna look pretty foolish here, and I'm gonna get clowned on Twitter when someone bookmarks these rankings and then pulls it out in October and looks at me as like, see, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know ball.
We don't know ball.
You know, but I guess that was my big hesitation is like we've seen all the time with 4- and 5-star players. They were highly recruited out of high school, and then they get on the field and they don't live up to that ranking. Like DJU is someone notable that I think about all the time. 4- or 5-star guy, never really lived up to that ranking, was never even close to living up to that 5-star tutelage. So it's like Austin Novas. The idea of him sounds good. I have to see him on the field. If he is who he says he is, the Bowling Green could very well be a top half team, like in this conference. But until then, like I just got to see it to believe it.
Yeah, part of me is in that same realm as well. Mainly for the point that you said, Eddie George still has to prove himself as a head coach. I am still holding hope in Eddie George as a head coach at Bowling Green. I think they still need to just give him a little bit more time. Maybe if not this season, one more season next year, and then maybe consider a change. But I think Eddie George is making some solid additions through the portal. I think they're going to try to be competitive once again. So I'm holding out hope for Eddie George in Bowling Green.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I would give Eddie George definitely one more year beyond this year. I think 3 years is a reasonable timeline. I know that that's been accelerated, especially what Curt Cignetti has done at Indiana and how immediately you turn that program around. But going outside the athletic director ticking time bomb, that conundrum in college sports right now, I've always thought that 3 to 4 years is a reasonable timeline. And from there, you know whether you would want them there long term or you need to go in a different direction. So I'm definitely with you on that, regardless of what happens, unless it's a complete, like a UMass level disaster. I think Eddie George should get a 3rd year, but we'll see how he does in year number 2.
For sure.
So you are a lot higher on Bowling Green than I am. So it makes me curious to think what you had going in terms of, as we start entering the top 10 consensusly for the MAC, who you had is I guess, starting off in your top 10 of this Midwestern institution?
I'm gonna put Eastern Michigan at 10. I'm gonna put Eastern Michigan at 10. I don't think they're. I don't. I'm just not. I'm just not sold on them. I'm just not sold on them right now. I'm cool with Noah Kim coming back at quarterback, Joshua Link at tight end, nearly 400 yards receiving out of the tight end position. They lose their best offensive lineman, Mac, into stat to UCLA. He leads through the portal. And Tyler Brumfeld is an incoming tackle. Still don't know how he really is going to play out for Eastern Michigan. So I just don't know enough right now about Eastern Michigan. They didn't really make two notable additions to the portal. They finished second to last in the conference in portal additions in their rankings. So Eastern Michigan, I think I only have him here for the quarterback continuity. So I'm gonna put the Eagles here at 10.
So you know what? This is gonna surprise some people. When I mention this, I did not have Eastern Michigan at number 10. I didn't have Eastern Michigan at number 9 even. Matter of fact, I had them ahead of Akron, and not only ahead of Akron, I had Eastern Michigan as in the top half of his conference. I had Eastern Michigan at number 6. So first and foremost, I want to start this conversation off with a head coach that I don't think gets talked about enough because of what his record is at the school. But given how difficult it is to win in Ypsilanti, heck of a town name, by the way, Chris Creighton is one of the best coaches in this conference, and no one talks about him because Eastern Michigan is so hard to win at. But he's done. You're gonna look at his record and laugh, but he is one of the best coaches that Eastern Michigan has ever had, and he is absolutely one of the best coaches in this conference. But no one's gonna talk about him because, again, it's really hard to win there. But Chris Creighton always knows how to maximize the talent on his team, and they didn't bring in a lot of talent in the portal, but they didn't lose a lot either. They did lose Everett Small, like you mentioned. He's going to Rutgers. They did lose Andrew Marshall as well. He's going to Minnesota. He had 60 tackles for them in 2025. So was a couple of losses. But beyond that, you're talking about guys that had production. Eastern Michigan didn't lose a lot of those guys. And they do bring back not only Noah Kim, but one of his favorite targets in Joshua Long. Second team all-conference player, tight end, like for his Eagles. He's going to be top weapon for this Eagles offense. And between that and knowing that Chris Creighton is one of the best conference coaches in this conference, when Chris Creighton steps up on the field in the MAC, he is rarely the second best head coach in this on the field at any given time. And I would put him up against many of these coaches. He's easily top 5 for me. So a lot of it is in Chris Creighton I trust and giving him his flowers. But that's why I had Eastern Michigan at number 6.
Put in the hype video. You just cut a whole promo.
I know. I know the boys at Ypsilanti need to fly me out after that one. But no, I mean, Chris Creighton, he's an incredible coach, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves. But I think he's incredible, and I think he's going to do an incredible job with this team. I thought last year's team was worse than this year's team, and even this year, this past year, Eastern Michigan, while they didn't go bowling, they were still a competitive football team, and they were a tough team to beat on any given Saturday.
Yeah, I was just scrolling back through their schedule. 1, 2. I mean, a couple one-score losses within conference play. They easily could have been a bowl team if they just flipped those. Ohio, Buffalo was a 1-point loss. So yeah, a couple one-score games. If you flip those, they're a bowl team. So I'm not doubting Chris Creighton. I mean, he's been there for a long time. As you said, he's proven to get stuff done at Eastern Michigan at a place that's not easy to win at by any means. So I think that I just don't know what I'm getting out of Eastern Michigan right now. I think it's a lot of unknowns, but the proven stuff that is coming back, I think will carry this team going forward. So Yeah, that's the only reason I have him at 10. It's just a lot of unknown right now. But of course, we're going into the spring, so we might get some questions answered.
Yeah. Yeah, and if some of those questions turn into strengths, I mean, hey, Chris Creighton has found a way to win with less. And
Yes.
I think he has more to work with than at least last year, particularly as you mentioned with Noah Kim coming back, at least having an experienced quarterback. And I think that matters a lot. I guess like in that circumstance, so like I've spent a little bit of time glazing Eastern Michigan. I guess I probably should like jump into who I have as my my number 10, and it's everyone's favorite new kid on the block. It's Sacramento State. That's Sacramento State at number 10. I thought this was so at the end of last year, when I was kind of looking at like the SP Plus like rankings that Bill Connolly puts out, and he does a really good job of not just ranking like the FBS teams, but really looking at FCS D2, D3. Sacramento State seemed to check in as like an upper half of like of the MAC last year, just based on those SP Plus rankings. That being said, you're talking about a brand new head coach in Alonzo Carter, first time head coach. Great backup dancer for MC Hammer, and a really good assistant at Arizona as well. Never seen him in charge of a program before, so I have questions there in terms of how he runs his program and how he turned Sacramento State into his image. They also got rated in the transfer portal. Matter of fact, I'm looking at Sacramento State, and they arguably were the most rated of any team in this conference. You're talking about 7 players that had significant production and were starting for your team last year that have now transferred to different schools. So, Sacramento State definitely, they got rated here a little bit. You're bringing in an FCS level roster. It's a good roster, a solid roster. They played the Big Sky last year. Big Sky's a really good conference in the FCS. But because they got rated and you're looking at a brand new head coach, I couldn't go much higher than number 10. I certainly have some questions on the Hornets that need to be answered before putting them higher.
Ditto. I literally have not much to add to that, just solely because exactly for all the reasons you pointed out with Sac State. I think there's a lot of turnover at one time, let alone taking the step up to the FBS level. I'm going to put them at 9, just solely for all the reasons that you talked about. I think it's just a lot of turnover at one time. Alonzo Carter, we don't know how he's going to be as a full-time head coach. And mainly, I mean, the portal additions weren't, I mean, their better players did get rated, like you said. So Sac State, I'm cool with at 9. They could take a step up, but I think it's just too much turnover at one time. New coach, new level of competition. Sac State, I think I'm good having just below the bottom half of the conference right now, but obviously we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sucks that they had to go and get a brand new head coach. I was hoping that Brandon Marion was going to stick around a little bit longer, because I think the go-go offense in the MAC would have been a really interesting thing to watch from a stylistic standpoint, knowing that the MAC is a little bit more of a, like a meat and potatoes of like part of the country. So it would have been really interesting to see how the go-go offense would have meshed against that meat and potatoes mentality that you see from a lot of these teams in this particular part of the country. Now that they're going in with a brand new head coach, this is really a fork in the road for Sacramento State, because if they don't do well in this conference in the next few years, either they're going to be stuck in the MAC, or they're going to be an irrelevant FBS independent, or they're even going back to the FCS and they're going to be laughed at on Twitter when we're looking back at this 5 to 10 years from now. So it's a brand new head coach, and it's arguably one of the most important moments of Sacramento State football history. Because where the direction that they go as a program really decides on the next 3 to 4 seasons.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, they've obviously shown to be investing on their stadium, on their personnel. I think they're just going to try to throw money around and to try to be competitive. If I'm being completely honest, I think they're just going to open up the checkbook, go to some, highly touted, or at least, reasonably touted portal players that come about the next few cycles and be like, name your number, and you can come to Sac State and make however much money you want to be, however much money you want to make. So that's just my personal thought on Sac State. It might work out, it might not. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, as is, it was said in the like the movie Dodgeball, it's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it works out for them.
Or the great Tom Fernelli. It's good pickup. I don't know if it'll work out.
Yeah, it's like what we see about a lot of hires at the FBS level is like good hire. Don't know if it'll work. As a default stance.
Yes.
But hey, let's move on from Sacramento State, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump into another school that I had slightly above Sacramento State. I had the Kent State Golden Flashes coming in as my number 9 team personally, and it seems that you're higher on this Golden Flashes team than I am. I will say this about Kent State. I thought Mark Carney did an incredible job in terms of being the interim coach last year. So I want to be the first to say that, especially taking over for Kenny Burns and the disaster of what that era was. 1-23, and this guy was still around. He only got fired because of some credit card debt that he accrued on the, I guess, Kent State, like basically their travel card. Right. That was the only. If he was financially responsible, he would have still been the head coach last year. And he steps in, messy situation, been the laughing stock of the FBS the last couple of years, and he goes out and man, did he maximize the talent on his team. They nearly made a bowl game. Made a bowl game read. Now, the reason why I didn't have them higher, they lost quite a bit of talent, man. Cade Wofford, that is a huge loss. Superstar wide receiver. Now going to be going down I-71 to go play for the Cincinnati Bearcats, which I'm sure Scott Satterfield is excited to bring him in. They also lose to Sean Martin as well on the outside. He transfers to Virginia, and they lose a few other people as well throughout this roster. They do bring back the realist Clark, though, who was his mate at across from Cade Wofford, first team all conference guy, at least from a kick return specialist. First team all name guy. I mean, the realist Clark, bro. That's what we're naming people in the Big 2026. That's an incredible name. CJ Young is also a talented linebacker. He's going to be the captain of his defense this year. Second team all conference guy. The linebacking room for Kent State could be sneaky good because they added Shamaj Bridgman, transfers in from Michigan State. He was a former blue chip prospect. Don't know what you're going to get out of him because 247 Sports didn't even bother to give him a transfer portal rating. But, you know, if he produces for you, that's house money. If he starts, that's great. But yeah, I just feel this is kind of the same team that we see from last year to this year. I don't know how much better of a job that Mark Carney can do from what he did last year, if that was the ceiling that we saw in terms of Mark Carney's coaching ability.
I'm not too much higher on them than you. I have Kent State at 7. I just think Mark Carney is going to carry on the momentum from last season to this season. Quarterback continuity, they do keep Drew DeShields at quarterback. I think quarterback continuity is huge nowadays in college football. Wayne Harris is able to stay in the receiver room along with Ardell Banks, who was a contributor last season. Hunter Hopperton, and Tariq Mulder. Hunter Hopperton, just great name. All name team. Top 2 tight ends are retained. They retained a good crop of their offensive line. That linebacking and defensive line, exactly for like you said, I think is going to be the biggest question marks surrounding this Kent State team. But Rocco Nicole coming in from South Florida, Hayden Deware from Kentucky, I think is just good depth pieces that are obviously going to make day one impacts. They were depth pieces at the FBS or other FBS schools. Now I think they're going to take a step up and be good contributors for this Kent State team. So I think Mark Carney's just going to carry the momentum from last season. That's solely why I have him at 7. I think even if he has him at 500 again in the conference, that's another very successful season for, again, a program that has been bottom of the barrel in this conference for a long time. Mark Carney, I think, just carries the momentum going into the second season.
Yeah, and if he does carry that momentum and he surpasses expectations, I would not be surprised if he ends up becoming this hot name, like on the coaching carousel, as we
Yep.
get into like November, as we start to see coaching openings open up at the Power Four, as well as some of these maybe more highly regarded G6 schools as well,
Mhm.
because we've seen like Kent State be a winner before. We've seen this under Sean Lewis, so it is possible to win at Kent State and be a bowl contender year in year out at Kent State. But again, I'm just curious to see if if this is the ceiling for Mark Carney, or if
Mhm.
he involves fervor. So it's a fascinating storyline to watch, especially like you're in that part of the country.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just one name that we both didn't mention, Jamon Mathis, huge hole being that needs to be filled on that defensive line. He leaves for Texas Tech.
Yes.
Was easily one of their most productive defensive linemen last season. So how they backfill that defensive line group is in that linebacker group. I mean, those are the two standout questions for Kent State for me personally. So I think offense gets enough continuity at each position group that they're going to be at least competitive offensively. Defense is where I have my questions for Kent State going into next season.
Yeah, so I guess it makes me I guess it want makes the people wonder, you had Kent State at number 7. So I mean, I guess I need to figure out, what happens to be my number 7, and maybe I could catch up to like to your part of the board like eventually, I guess I'm generally harsher than you are on some of these teams. But I'll go ahead and jump into my number 7 team. I had the Buffalo Bulls like coming in at number 7. Pete Lambeau, he's got to have something to prove. He had a really nice year number 1, and then
Mhm.
year 2, his Buffalo team had some hype. I had them as a dark horse pick to go to the college football playoff last year, or at least be in that conversation in November. And boy, did they do me dirty, Pete Lambeau. So year 3, going to be looking for some revenge here. One name to watch out for, and I think this name is going to be he has a chance to be the freshman player of the year on the defensive side of the ball in this conference. Malachi Irvin. He's a 4-star recruit, like on
Mhm.
247 Sports, edge rusher. I imagine that he comes in and contributes right away and starts right away for his Buffalo's Bulls football team. But not only do they have edge rushers that I'm excited about, they also added Logan Goodwin out of IUP, who had 7 sacks last year. They also took a different approach in terms of the quarterback position. Last year, they went a little bit more on potential. They got the backup from Kansas State. Didn't really pan out for them, was a little too inconsistent. This year, they grabbed Elijah Holmes out of Wingate, over 3,300 yards passing last year, 27 touchdowns. So a lot more experience this time. And I imagine Elijah Holmes will have a lot to say in terms of possibly being the starter. Now, why I couldn't be higher on him, because I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to be honest with you. Victor Snow and Nick McMullen are 2 top receivers, gone like a girl in a country song, both going to power conference teams. And then they do lose some experienced defensive pieces as well. So Logan Goodwin and Malachi Irvin, who is going to be fresh off of high school prom, they're going to have to step in right away and make sure that there isn't too much of a fall off on the defense side of the ball.
There's a lot of question marks surrounding this Buffalo team, but I think they get answered. I have Buffalo at number 5.
Okay.
I think the question marks do get answered solely because you mentioned that defensive line is going to have a lot of holes to fill. Caleb Oliver and Stantavius Smith both come in from the FCS level of Wofford and Florida A&M respectfully. Production at the FCS level, does it translate to the MAC? I think it could. Joey Cheshire comes in from Connecticut at linebacker, will be an impact player. So I think defensively they added enough pieces that are going to make impacts on the defensive side. They bring in a few O linemen from former Power 4 levels, Joe Crocker from Baylor, Nino Francavilla from Miami also comes in on the offensive line. I think they step in as day one starters, but Biggest question mark for Buffalo, who is throwing and catching the football? That's the biggest. Those are the two biggest questions for exactly the reasons you said. Nick McMillan, Victor Snow, out the door at receiver. I mean, they were dominant, 800 and nearly 1,000-yard receivers last season. And Taquan Roberson is finally out the door after, being on 5 different college football teams in his career. So who is going to be throwing the ball for the Bulls? Time will tell. I think they figure it out. I think they're in the upper half of this conference. I think Pete Lembo carries momentum from last season. They weren't a terrible team last year. They were a very competitive team in multiple games last season. So I think Buffalo carries the momentum with Pete Lembo going into year 3. I just think they're right below the upper echelon of this conference.
Yeah, and that's a fair point as well. While this team was disappointing, I think compared to like expectations that some folks had of this Buffalo football team, that doesn't mean that they were terrible by any means. Yes, they didn't make it to a bowl game, but I mean it was still a competitive football team, and they were in a lot of games, and maybe a couple of games that they should have won, but just couldn't quite pull through because of that offensive inconsistency. If the defense stays at the relatively same level and this offense has a little bit more consistency, like you mentioned, Reed, you're talking about a team that could be a dark horse that could play a pivotal picture of who goes and possibly goes to Detroit for the MAC championship game, or at least having a say in it, whether it's they're playing spoiler or they're physically showing up there themselves because of the parity that we witness.
Yeah, I think Buffalo definitely is going to have a say. Not saying they make the conference championship, but I definitely think they're going to have an impact on the upper tier here. So I think if I feel enough confidence, I might bump them up by the fall, but I think I'm good sticking them right at 5 here. Good midpoint between the middle of the conference and the upper tier.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at our chart here. We're getting ready to fill out this top 5, or at least most of our top high, and I'm seeing this massive gaping hole like right about here, where my Eastern Michigan logo stands. So you're not on high on this this next team, but you still think that they could be at least in that upper half of the MAC, like in 2026. So I'm just curious, who is that team for you that you don't view as highly as Buffalo, but still be a solid team in this conference this year?
The Ohio Bobcats are my number 6 team. When I tell you one of my favorite players in all of college football is no longer there, let's have a moment of silence for the one and only Sia Bingara. Okay, the moment has passed. Sia Bingara, over 40% of their carries last season, nearly a 1,400-yard rusher out the door. Parker Navarro, also not there anymore. So top receiver Chase Hendricks, going out west to Cal. Your top 3 offensive players are out the door. Who backfills, time will tell. I think Ohio has been competitive for long enough in this conference that they make some noise. I think there's got to be regression with how much turnover offensively is happening for John Hauser. So I just don't know with Ohio right now. I just don't know. I think it's hard to backfill those 3 players I just named offensively. A lot of question marks for me. So I have Ohio just on the edge of the upper tier at 6.
Yeah, so I actually had Ohio a little bit higher than you. Not too much higher, but a couple of spots higher. I had them coming in as number 4. Some of it I will acknowledge. It's acknowledging like how good this program has been over the years. Yes. They have been they've been a top 3 program in this conference over the last 5 to 10 years. So part of it is me trusting the program, because you're right, Chase Hendricks, that's a huge loss. Sucks that he's going to go to Cal and not be the leading receiver for his Ohio football team. And they do lose a couple of other players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, and Jalen Thompson and Jay Crable as well. Crable particularly, that was an all-conference player. He's now at FAU. I do think that John Hauser, based on what I saw in the bowl game, that I liked what I saw from a coaching perspective in terms of, coming in as an underdog without Parker Navarro, without their head coach and what they went through, and still going in and beating a quality UNLV team
Mhm.
in the bowl game. And while they do lose Chase Hendricks and they do lose a couple of other like all conference players, they didn't lose a ton though. So there's still some talent here. And I'm curious with Eli Thompson as well. He's transferring in from Holy Cross. Dude is a ball hawk. Coming in with 4 interceptions last year during the 2025 campaign. You're able to get multiple interceptions as a DB. You know how to find the ball, and I think that can translate well in this conference. So some of this is me believing in John Hauser. I will acknowledge that. But still, those pieces that actually played in the bowl game, in spite of the transfer portal opt-outs, and still find a way to beat a really good football team in UNLV. I think Ohio, I think they're going to be okay.
I think they will be okay as well. I think this is just a turnover year with the whole head coaching debacle. So, proven track record of competing and being at the upper tier of this conference for Ohio. I think this is just a transition year, and namely for the notable losses that we both have talked about. So I think this is just a transition year, but I still think I still view Ohio as in the upper half of this conference for sure.
Yeah, and now that I'm like thinking about that upper half and starting to firmly get into my top 5, I already mentioned it with Ohio at 4. The team that I had behind them, I did have Central Michigan like coming in here at number 5. Got another directional school here. Central Michigan, that was a team that surprised me last year. I didn't think that they were going to be a really competitive football team last year, but Matt Drinkle right away putting his imprints on the program. Finishing 7-6, and we talked about him being a former Army guy, and so it showed in his level play in that offensive line. And that continuity is relatively going to be there. They do also keep Langston Lewis, who's a third-team all-conference player in the MAC. They also added some pieces. I think they added more than they lost, which is good news, considering the majority of this conference can't necessarily say that. They added Jaden Krolix, for example. He transferred in from Holy Cross, and he had nearly over 750 rushing yards last year. They also added Daryl Bryant and Matthew McKenzie, both pretty good defensive backs, both who had multiple interceptions at the FCS level last year. Matt Drinkle has this program trending in an upward direction. And so even though they do lose a couple of guys who also had multiple interceptions last year, they went off to Power 4 programs. I think the DB room is going to be fine. And I think Matt Drinkle has his program trending in the right direction.
Totally agree. And that's why I have Central Michigan as my 3rd team. I have Central Michigan at 3. I think the pieces they kept are very solid, and exactly for the point that you made, I think that they made more additions than they had losses. I'm going to go top to bottom. Angel Flores, I think, could be a fascinating quarterback to watch in this conference. Rushed for over 500 yards last year with 8 touchdowns on the ground. If he gets more consistent, if he has more consistency through the air, I think that's what could make him an upside quarterback in this conference. Brock Townsend comes back at running back. I think he's an upside. He has a lot of high upside potential at running back. They also bring in Vaughn Blue from Liberty. Didn't get the most notable production last season, but I think he takes a step up from his play with the Flames for the Chippewas. Had over 200 yards rushing, a couple touchdowns. So I think he takes a step up. Langston Lewis out the door at receiver, I think is going to be a major loss. So who steps up in his shoes? Probably Tommy McIntosh from the looks of it for Central Michigan. So I think if they can keep up their consistency that they had offensively last year, again, 5-3 conference record. If they can stay consistent on both sides of the ball, then I think the Chippewas have a real shot of being in the top 3 next season. So mainly for the points that you talked about, the defense is where most of my questions fall. That linebacking group is going to take a real hit from production last season. So how do they backfill that? But I think their depth is good enough. A lot of younger players in that linebacking group. So time will tell, obviously, how that linebacking group steps up. But I think Central Michigan definitely has the potential to make some noise in the next season.
Yeah, and if Central Michigan actually surpasses Ohio or gets themselves into that tier 1 contender, I wouldn't be surprised either. I like what Mac Drinkle is doing, surpassing expectations in year number 1 and really how they finished the year out. There's some room here for Central Michigan to take another step forward. So it'll be an interesting team to watch in the MAC, and maybe, and you certainly would probably agree with this, if you have the number 3, a dark horse team to win this conference,
For sure.
I think that's certainly fair. But I know that there is a team out there that, you're not as high on as the Central Michigan team that we already talked about. But there's certainly a team where you look at them and, there's some potential there to be a dark horse to win this conference as well. So who would that team be for you as your, I guess, current number 4 team as we get ready to go into what we're looking at for the spring?
I have the Toledo Rockets at number 4.
Okay.
They got gutted in the portal, but I think they added just enough production back through the portal to, at least be competitive next season. I mean, Malachi Davis is probably the biggest loss. He's multiple linebackers. Kevon Sherman also out the door. They're both going to P4s or Connecticut and Rutgers, respectfully. Anthony Boswell, an offensive lineman, going to Houston. A couple of defensive backs and D linemen also at the door to P4 schools. So I think they backfilled enough, though. CJ Miller is the one I'm keeping an eye on. He's a running back from Mercer. Got a ton of game time for the Bears last season. So I'm keeping an eye out on him. Mercer was one of the more productive offensives last season for the Bears. So CJ Miller is a player I'm keeping an eye on at running back, and Anthony Simpson, P4 production from Michigan. So I think Toledo, although they did lose a lot, I think they backfilled enough through the portal to at least stay in this upper half of the conference. So I'm gonna put the Rockets at 4.
Yeah, so Toledo is really fascinating because we joked about whether we're going to see the Iowa State Nittany Lions or the Penn State the Penn State Cyclones this fall.
Yeah.
You could almost say the same thing about Toledo, right? Are we going to be looking at the Toledo Bears, or are we looking at the the Mercer Rockets, right? Because a lot of the intriguing ads that we've seen, they all come from Mercer, whether it's CJ Miller, Audrey Dabbs, Andrew Zock, Julian Fox. I mean, the list goes on in terms of who they brought in. And these are guys that have production, mind you. Whereas on the other hand, their coach went to UConn, but the majority of the players that they lost in the transfer portal that had tangible production, they actually went to other places and not UConn. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. What I'm more concerned about, though, is how they're going to replace the NFL level talent, because they had 3 guys that were on the the PFF top 300 board for prospects. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is a big one that constantly gets talked about, could possibly be a first-round pick. But Andre Fuller is here too. Chip Trainum is getting NFL looks as well. So that's what I'm more concerned about. But I am intrigued by the Mike Jacobs hire, though. I think he did a really good job at Mercer, has Mercer as one of the top programs in the FCS, and now he comes up here at the FBS level for the first time. He intrigues me. And in spite of all the turnover, they bring multiple all-conference guys, and even Spoth, interior offensive lineman, second-team All-MAC. And then Bryson Hammer is one of the best returnmen in this conference, too. Third-team all-conference guy as well. So I actually had Toledo at number 2, matter of fact, because I think there's a lot of potential here. And I think there's enough of the baseline to work off of where Toledo can be playing in Detroit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Toledo is definitely going to be in competition with these top 4 teams that we have. I feel like it's really, if their Mercer production can translate, they're going to be competitive, because Mercer was one of the best FCS teams last season. So if the Mercer production can translate, I definitely see Toledo being in this top 4.
Yeah, I definitely can see that as well. So, for now, I see Toledo as a team playing in Detroit, and I almost said the same thing about this next team that I'm going to mention here on this list. I have the Miami Redhawks as my number 3 team. First and foremost, I think Miami is the best program like in this conference. I still have some questions in terms of the roster itself, which is why I didn't have them as my number one team. But I still think that there's plenty to like. First and foremost, I talked about Chris Creighton earlier tonight, and that was a big reason why I had Eastern Michigan in the top half. But in terms of being one of the best coaches in the conference, my number one coach would be Chuck Martin, who's entering his 13th year. He's won this conference multiple times before, most recently in 2023. They do bring in like Eric Smith back, who is an all-conference, left tackle. Nothing like having one of the best offensive linemen in your conference protecting your blind side, which is really important because for the same reason why I didn't have it at number one, what's that quarterback position going to look like as we go into the spring and into the summertime? But whoever wins that quarterback position, the offensive line should be really good. They portal in 3 offensive linemen that have breakout potential. They also brought Rodney Nelson, running back from Monmouth, over 2,000 yards too. So the quarterback, he just has to be average. He doesn't have to be a superstar by any means. We're not asking for any of that. I'm not asking you to be, the college version of Big Ben. That's not what we're asking here. Just don't be cheeks, right? That's really what we're looking for here. They also added a couple of power conference guys that were blue chipper crews, Ben Minich and Dylan Tatum. The one thing that sucks, though, besides quarterback position, they do lose Adam Trick. That's a huge loss. He's going to Texas Tech. He was a star player, one of the best edge rushers in this conference, gone. But I'm looking at what they added and what they returned. There's a lot to like here.
There is a lot to like here. That's why I have Miami as my second team. The only question mark I have about this team is quarterback, like you mentioned. A lot of returning production on both sides of the ball. Aside from the notable names that you said, Adam Trick going to Texas Tech, the offensive line continuity, again, like I've said, is huge for me personally when I view teams. So having offensive line continuity is seen here. I think the biggest standout for me is going to be their receiver additions. Actually, Devin Hyatt comes in from Arizona, and Demarion Witten, former 4-star prospect, comes in from the Ohio State. So I think that they could make immediate impacts at this wide receiver group for Miami. And again, like you said, I view Miami as arguably the best run program in this conference. The biggest question right now, who is going to be the quarterback, who's going to be swinging the rock around. So that is the only question I have for Miami. I see them being in the top 3, if not competing to go to Detroit.
Yeah, but I think like with what you're looking at here, because it seems that with all of these teams that we have in the MAC, we were on the same brainwave when it comes to UMass. We're going to be on the same brainwave with the other team. So I'm sure we know what the number one team is going to be. My question for you though is, is there a perceived gap between this team that we're about to rank number one as the other teams, or is there a more significant gap? Is there no gap? What's the temperature in terms of your top team?
So to answer the foregone question that you were asking, Western Michigan is our top team for both of us. The gap, however, I think it's selective, and I say that because they have major continuity at some positions that Miami of Ohio doesn't. Namely, that being quarterback. Brock Lowry is back, one of the better quarterbacks in this conference, passed and rushed for over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns on the ground. He's back at quarterback. Jalen Buckley, near 1,000-yard rusher, back at running back. I think just solely for him being he's really the only quarterback in this conference that we could say has continuity from last season. I mean, true continuity, proven production. They were, they won 10 games last season. They went 7-1 in this conference. Like, there is no other team that can say that they are bringing back that level of production, aside from Miami of Ohio, who brings a lot of their production back, namely on the offensive line and their entire defense. So biggest questions for me with Western Michigan, the defensive line. a lot of older players last season are out the door. Their top 7, namely defensive linemen, are out the door, but they backfill with a lot of commits, and namely Austin Alexander comes in from North Carolina, former 4-star prospect from the Tar Heels. He comes in on this defensive line group. So their linebackers are going to have some, a few good pieces. DeJuan Eccles Jr. From Ball State comes in. Brendan Annis, that didn't sound right, comes in from Tennessee. He didn't get a ton of playing time in Tennessee, but again, I think bringing some level of experience from a Power 4 level is good. Dea McCullough comes in from Louisville, former 4-star prospect at safety. Didn't get a ton of playing time for Louisville, but again, proven Power 4, caliber talent coming in the door. So I think solely because of that continuity on the offensive side of the ball with Buckley and Lowry staying in the backfield, they're a force to be reckoned with. If you didn't watch their bowl game, namely, just go watch the bowl game. That's all I'm going to tell you. It was literally college football 26 numbers they were putting up. It was ridiculous. So Western Michigan, without a doubt, number 1.
Yeah, and what's crazy about the bowl game, because I mean you hit a lot with what I was gonna say right on the head, so I won't have too much more to add. What's crazy about that bowl game in particular, it's not like they were playing against a team that just barely squeaked by into a bowl game, or a team that wasn't necessarily motivated to play it. They took a team that won the Conference USA and won 10 games in their own right, and it was a team that both you and I, we were talking in the group chat like during the fall and in the wintertime. That Kennesaw State team was a team that we were considering ranking going in the bowl season.
Oh yeah.
So Western Michigan going down to Myrtle Beach and taking them to the woodshed and providing a BDA treatment, that really it did something to the psyche of this Western Michigan program. It's like what you said, I think they have the most returning production in this conference. The only thing that they did lose was Nadine Tucker, their edge rusher. He's going to go off to the NFL. But other than that, you could even argue that they're better. Like they added like Corey Crump, AJ Green as well. He was another guy, running back from Arkansas, former blue chip recruit too. So this team might be better. So I had Western Michigan as number 1. But I don't think it's even close right now. Like unless there's some questions that are answered for some of these other teams in the spring, if Western Michigan doesn't win the MAC, that's a disappointment. It's title or bust.
Yeah, I mean, you view Toledo higher than I do, but I mean, we both have Toledo and Miami of Ohio in our top 4. So those are probably the 2 teams I would say that are really have a chance to compete. I mean, Miami of Ohio definitely, I think, is the only real team that I would say on paper their roster can compete with Western Michigan. So yeah, I mean, I was watching that Kennesaw State game. I was just sitting on the couch watching because I mean there was nothing else going on, and it was like every time I turned away and looked up, oh, Jalen Buckley touchdown, Jalen Buckley touchdown, Jalen Buckley ran for 70 yards. Like, yeah, he was incredible that game. So I mean, just solely for that performance, I think they have to be at the top. I mean, they literally took a 10-win conference champion to the back rooms, and like it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So yeah, the Broncos, I mean, and we didn't even mention it. They hung around, I mean, it was in week 2, but they hung around with North Texas, who ended up competing in their conference championship too. So they only lost that game by 3. So
and honestly, that was the game that they really should have won. Western Michigan had that game won, and North Texas, like we didn't know about at the time, but Drew Messamaker made some big plays there at the end to be able to force overtime and then proceed to win that game in overtime. And I think that game was if I'm not mistaken, it was in Denton, Texas. I believe North Texas was hosting.
North Texas was home.
So Western Michigan went on the road to what turned out to be one of the best G5 teams in the country last year, and nearly won it, and should have won that game. But it's funny that you mentioned that story about the Myrtle Beach Bowl, because I remember Like I was at work that day, because I had to, unfortunately be a responsible adult. And what happened was like I got to like a more dull moment in the day, and I knew like, hey, like Myrtle Beach Bowl, 10 a.m. or like 11 a.m. kickoff, let me go ahead and check in and see what's going on. And I opened it. I saw Western Michigan was up by 4 touchdowns, and my jaw dropped.
They got out
and dropped in my little cubicle in the corner.
They got out in a hurry. I remember that. They were up what was the can I try to pull up the box score here? Because they got up fast. I can't. Western Michigan, Kennesaw.
I know. Now look at us, like frantically like searching for a box score on the blue
for a box score. Yeah, Jalen Buckley 174 on the ground.
Sheesh. Yeah, my man went crazy that day, and I mean it ended up being a massive win for them. That was their 10th win. They win 41-6 against again a team that won 10 games and won their conference in their own right. So again, like it's a team that you're looking at, and you gotta. If I would be surprised if they're not playing in Detroit. I'm just gonna put it out there.
Yeah, totally agree. And to answer my own question, they were up 27-0 after the first quarter. So yeah. Jalen Buckley only 8 carries, 174. He was averaging 22 yards a carry. Like,
yeah, that's somebody ridiculous. That could essentially like went ahead and if somebody turned the sliders down to freshman difficulty, that's what it looked like for Western Michigan. It was inspiring to watch. I would say it still leaves me speechless to this day, but man, it's been an electric night talking about one of the institutions of college football. One last thing that I want to point out, because I know we were talking about Western Michigan. This is a team that won 10 games last year. And with how they did in the bowl game, I'm actually surprised that they don't get more talk about being the CFP representative.
I think they're going to be in my conversation for sure. Not to preview what we're going to do here soon, Jake, but they're going to be in that conversation.
Yeah, because I know we're definitely going to get in there like sometime this summer, and I'm sure we're going to do it again like in as it gets closer to the fall. But just looking on the discourse on Twitter in terms of who they think is going to be the G6 representative, I never hear Western Michigan mentioned. And
never.
Yeah, we just talked about with the returning production and how they finished the year out. I'm a little surprised that they don't get talked about at all.
Yeah, I mean they talk about more teams that lost more production from last season in the portal or graduation. However, so they talk about more of those teams than they do with Western Michigan, who has some of the most returning production in all of the G6.
Yeah, and they'll have a chance to prove themselves as well, because I'm taking a peek at what's available from the non-conference schedule. They host Boise State September 26th, so that's going to be a game to circle. In terms of CFP chance, if they win that game and they don't take any devastating losses aside from a Michigan game, I mean, I don't expect them to beat Michigan by any means. That's a game that I look at that could really determine the fate of Broncos football in terms of what the upside is.
Yes, for sure. And I don't think I just don't think we talked about Lance Taylor enough. I think Lance Taylor is doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, I mean, it was rough like the first couple of years, but now he's got it rolling now. Like doubled his win count from his first 3 years. So glad that they were patient with him. But hey, man, we're going to get ready to sign off here tonight. Thank you guys so much. Even in the midst of March Madness, sitting down with us for an hour and a half and just talking ball and talking some action and really was the most incredible sport on the planet. With that being said, man, you got any final thoughts before we sign off here tonight?
I'm gonna have a perfect bracket. I don't know about you. Like I'm gonna have a perfect bracket.
And I'm gonna laugh incredibly hard when we get onto the live show next Monday. And that's not only that not true, but I see your ass at the very bottom.
I say I'm gonna have a perfect bracket. I'm gonna lose the first game tomorrow, Ohio State TCU. I'm gonna lose the first game of the tournament.
Yeah, but hey, with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and sign off here tonight. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. And then we touched up on March Madness like challenges. You know, I am hosting one personally. He's hosting one on the Twitter. So if that's something that will tickle your pickle a little bit, I'll post that in on the community tab, like here on YouTube. So that you guys have an opportunity to join before the first official game starts tomorrow at around noon. But hey, with that being said, hopefully you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care